This competency, again, quite an interesting one from my perspective, because it's always the one that when you talk to CWC delegates, they think they're really good at.
Yeah.
And actually, there is an element of truth in that, because as leaders, or if you're working, developing relationships is so key.
Yeah.
So often you'll find that as a starting point, people are feeling pretty comfortable with this competency, which is quite nice, because you don't want everybody to be thinking about all the competencies being something completely new.
Yeah.
So it's almost a nice one to bring in at the beginning, because building trust and rapport is something we have to do as human beings, personally, professionally. So it's always a good starting point, I think.
Yeah.
I would say out of the 8 competencies, putting self-awareness to one side,
Mm.
because that is foundational, this is probably the most important competency that determines, alongside self-awareness, whether your coaching is transactional or transformational.
Mm.
Because if you can't build that deep trust and that connection,
Yeah.
the work will stilt and stop at a certain point. You won't go any deeper. You won't really do the work. You'll do the surface stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and it amazes me there are still coaches out there that don't do chemistry calls.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's just
Yeah.
it is
You have to.
non-negotiable.
And I think also doing those chemistry calls really from the point of view of there's a coach for everybody.
Absolutely.
But let's make sure that, you want that partnership to be, and I always think of it as a partnership, and that, we're both in this and it's got to work.
Yeah.
And I want that for the client. So, if I'm not quite the right fit, then that's totally fine. And we'll find the right coach for them.
Yeah.
But you're right, that's without that, it doesn't move to that sort of next deeper level.
It's quite a hard thing to call out, though, isn't it, as a coach, particularly when you're starting off and you want to be working with clients, and maybe you're setting up your own coaching business, or you're working for somebody else, and you're sort of desperate to work with clients. You really want to make it work. But I bet we've all experienced situations in chemistry calls where you just think, there's something about this that's not working. I think it's really hard to call it out as a coach, but it makes such a difference, because if you continue down thinking this will be fine, it'll work, often it doesn't. And then you're right, it becomes a transactional, it's not quite working. Maybe the client's not being as honest with you as they could be. There's not that openness. There's not that trust flowing. You can feel it, can't you, as a coach? So the chemistry calls are critical, both for the client to know they can work with you, but also for you as a coach to be brave enough to say, this isn't going to work. Or you notice something that you think, there isn't that connection, or it's not going to be able to be built. So it's quite a hard one to name as a coach, I think, but critical.
For me, it's about the contracting piece, because I see when we're in the program of Coaching with Confidence, we're often talking to people about the importance of contracting and always recontracting, but that initial contracting dialogue not being seen as a must say this, must transact on this, don't worry, it's confidential, and you can see a copy of my notes, and it becomes a bit sort of scripted. But actually how important that is as a principle for a brand new relationship. So for me, we have, in our coaching work, we tend to be with a client for about 6 months, maybe 6 sessions. That's 12 hours in a relationship, a brand new relationship. And you can transform in partnership where that client is over 12 hours. That's one long working day.
Yeah.
But without that foundation of self-awareness and robust contracting, which allows you to fast forward through some of the normal human dynamics of being in new relationships.
You're doing it. You are speeding it up.
That's right. You move fast.
Yeah. And calling things out.
And you apply discipline, but it allows you to leverage something that in a standard relationship, for the first time of meeting, you would never go to.
You're still at the bar having a drink, you haven't gone on to the dance floor. And yet people head to the dance floor quite quickly.
Very quickly.
Because of that, the space that is created through that contracting, through you being, as coach, super self-aware. So you're ready and you're in that space and you're open and you're listening to that client from that very initial chemistry call and understanding am I the right, no egos in coaching it. Am I the right person for this person? Because if I'm not, in service of that client, I need to say,
Yeah.
let's introduce you to somebody else and you have a flavour and you can make the choice.
But I also wonder around what it feels like being the internal coach, because it's easier to contract as an external coach because there are professional boundaries. And probably for a lot of the people on the program in their learning environment, they're doing this within an organizational context, either as a senior leader or maybe an internal coach or a community of coaches. So therefore, contracting for me feels even more
I was
important.
about to say that. It's more important, not less,
yeah.
because you have to call out that you're doing something different.
Yeah.
And I was just, as you were talking, I was reflecting on in CWC, one of the things that I love about it is seeing people become more confident in contracting. So it can be at the start a little bit like the tip list and awkward because they're not feeling like it's suddenly like, this is weird. Yeah. And then you suddenly see people that bring their personality, their whole self into it, and suddenly it clicks.
Yeah.
So I love that. I kind of feel like in CWC you see okay, I'm now being like I've got to do this contracting, and it's a little uncomfortable, like you say, and it doesn't feel natural. And then pretty much by the end, when we get to module 4, we've got these natural contracting being done in their own style, their own language, their own way of being. And that's starts because you've got to be confident, you've got to direct the client, particularly when you're first, and the more you do that, you're educating, aren't you? So then the client comes to the sessions ready, prepared, because that trust is there. They know that they can come in and we just get going.
Yeah.
And the whole confidentiality piece as well for internal coaches, generally you're going to know who they're talking about and maybe work with that person as well, who might be their boss. So that whole piece around the hierarchy in the room, and really being able to have somebody that sits 2 desks away from you potentially share their deepest, darkest beliefs about themselves, about where they want to go in life. And that takes real skill.
Yeah.
I think if we all reflect on our own experiences of chemistry calls as well, if you think about the people that we've really connected with, I'm just reflecting now that the people I've really connected with are people like me. And where you almost find, it is that, we like people like ourselves. And that's always an interesting one as a coach, I think, because, from a diversity perspective, from an inclusion perspective, how are we creating those connections with people who are not like us, who don't look like us? And we know as an industry, it's a challenge, isn't it? Because it's very white dominated, it's very female dominated still. So I think from a coach's perspective, our own self-awareness and understanding how we build connections with people that perhaps it doesn't have to be instant.
No.
It's not always instant. And I think that's the other thing is if you know from a chemistry call, there are some where you think, I can work with this person. And they're like, I can work with you. But there are other instances where it becomes, actually, yes, I can see myself working with this person, but there's more conscious, intentional effort.
That's just consciousness, is it? Whereas, and that you're totally right, obviously we tend to, our friendships are people like us, we tend to hire even people like us. And in coaching, I think one of the things that is, very special about coaching is that ability to, on purpose and consciously call out, okay, we're going to have to operate slightly, you are different to me.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And we need to be conscious of that, and we need to bring it out in the open around what do we need to address. And having those really honest, frank conversations that maybe outside of a coaching scenario, you wouldn't feel comfortable or confident to have. You'd be like, I need to really know that person. And it's like you're saying, you're just speeding it up. Because you want the coaching to be, that's what I'm always driving me is we've only got 12 hours together. And I know it might feel like that's in a long time, but it's not. And I want to maximize it and want somebody to get the most impact from it. So therefore, again, it's coming back to that in service of this client. I'm going to say it. I'm going to bring it out in the open. We're going to contract on these things, and we're going to keep contracting to make sure that it's as impactful as it can be.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of other points that I just think are worth just referencing. One is the client's past experience of being coached. Because for some people that might have been a wonderful experience, and they were had such a high level of trust and rapport with their coach. And for others, they might have had a very bad experience where they didn't trust, or maybe the coach was sharing insights that they shouldn't have shared with the organization. So quite often in the contracting, it's really valuable to talk about what is your experience of being coached? Was that a positive or a negative? What did you like? What didn't you like? And how can I be mindful of that so we help fast track it? And the other thing for me is, how did they come into coaching in the first place?
Yeah.
So are they coming into coaching because this is a positive, developmental, this is a really beneficial space, or are they coming because they've been sent because there is a problem that needs to be fixed? And they're already in their sort of parent, adult, child mode. So I think the awareness of how we enter into coaching, both our experience of it and why we're in the room, really impacts this competency and requires us as coaches to consciously raise that conversation, bring it to the table, stay in the adult space, and then we can work through what needs to happen in the future competencies.
Yeah. And they're also linked, aren't they? Because as you were talking about that, I was like, I'm always aware that my focus listening is there as I'm contracting. I'm like, okay, there's what you're telling me, but how are you showing up? Who's here today? And here's this person, seems a little stressed, or is there a sadness, or do they seem really, alert and really excited about it? So like, what is, who is coming in the room today? And I think that, again, addressing that and saying, like, I'm using all my skills here and what I'm seeing, and playing it back to the client to say, right, that's what we're working with today, and that's fine. Whoever you are, whatever you're bringing in the room is fine. But let's be clear around that's where we're starting from.
Yeah.
See that.
So as a competency, when we talk about this with all of them, the danger is we go, they're all really important. And they are all really important. The evidence tells us that the relationship is absolutely critical. Getting that right, building trust, building rapport is fundamental to creating a transformational coaching experience.
Yeah.